Business is topical questions. We only have the one question today. Sandra White.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with Police Scotland regarding incidents at George Square and Glasgow City Centre at the weekend, including what safeguards will be put in place to ensure that COVID-19 restrictions are followed and there is no repeat of such disgraceful behaviour.
Cabinet Secretary Humza Yousaf.
It is essential that people stick to the rules and stay at home if we are to continue to drive down infection numbers. Shameful scenes like those that we witnessed over the weekend in Glasgow and beyond risk spreading the virus and delaying the removal and easing of restrictions. They show no regard or respect at all for the millions of people across Scotland who have been sticking to the rules, who haven't been able to meet up with friends and family, who haven't been able to fully celebrate birthdays, or indeed in some cases attend funerals for their loved ones. The desecration of memorial benches in Glasgow and George Square is a particularly sickening sight, and I hope that those involved are thoroughly ashamed of themselves. I've spoken with the Chief Constable and senior officers in Police Scotland on a number of occasions over the weekend and over last week. I'll be continuing dialogue with both Police Scotland and Rangers Football Club to understand why these events took place, what actions are now being taken to identify those responsible, and what more can be done, as Sandra White rightly says, to avoid this reoccurring at upcoming events. I note the Chief Constable has asked human rights lawyer John Scott QC, the independent chair of the Independent Advisory Group, to look at the policing response at the weekend and help inform lessons to be learned for upcoming events. I welcome this decisive action and external review, and the First Minister will also be meeting with the Chief Constable later on today to discuss matters.
Sandra White.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I certainly heard from the Chief Constable about an hour ago, but it was passing it on to another sergeant for a meeting which I requested. But I'm pleased to see that Police Scotland have took on board what I and many, many others have been asking for. However, I would certainly go further and ask for an investigation into the operations on Saturday and Sunday in particular. Reverend Noonan, in his comments there, summed up all that was going on in local communities against the scenes that we witnessed here in Glasgow on Sunday. They were truly, truly shocking. And questions have to be asked, whether the review, which I think is going ahead on the 12th of March, has been said, which is Friday, but I would still call for a full investigation, an independent investigation. And the questions which have been asked to me, and I'm posing to the Cabinet Secretary and to Police Scotland and to Rangers Football Club, was why did the police escort thousands of fans, people, through the streets of Glasgow, openly breaking all the COVID regulations, drinking openly in the street, urinating in the street, causing mayhem in the streets of Glasgow and George Square? Why was that part of a so-called operation to march and escort them down to George Square? That's one of the first questions I'd like to ask. How can that be a safe operation, which the police have put out a press release saying it was to protect the public? Well, I can assure everyone and the police there was no protection of the public. The public couldn't even walk in the streets for people being drunk and knocking them over. I had nurses from Glasgow Royal Infirmary who couldn't get home, who had to get a taxi home because they couldn't go out on the streets or on public transport. So yes, whilst I do welcome what's happening, I want to see more done, and I hope that is raised at the meeting on Friday. I also wonder if Rangers Football Club could possibly be either involved in this or basically open up to their responsibilities in that respect. And I ask the Cabinet Secretary if he would agree with me and many, many others that football clubs should be also part of an investigation into what their responsibilities are to the general public in this particular situation?
Cabinet Secretary.
First and foremost, Sandra White is the local constituency MSP for the area that was affected in terms of George Square, has every right to ask those questions of Police Scotland, of government of course, of the football club, of Rangers Football Club involved. I have spoken to the Chief Constable, who has said that for any elected member that wishes to have a debrief or briefing in relation to the weekend's events, then he will make sure that Police Scotland make themselves available to elected members. If they wish to go directly to Police Scotland, they can do that. If they wish to come to me, I'm happy to help facilitate that conversation. Sandra White asked a lot of questions, again, rightly so, around some of the operational decisions, but she will know, of course, that those operational matters are for Police Scotland to address. They are the experts when it comes to operational decisions, when it comes to crowd management, crowd control, the crowd dynamics involved in all of that. And they have put out statements to explain the decisions that they've taken. But again, it is right for Sandra White to ask further questions if she wishes. And again, I'm happy to make those arrangements if she wants. Otherwise, she can go to Police Scotland directly on those operational matters. She also mentions Rangers Football Club, and I think her suggestion is a good one. Just as Police Scotland are asking John Scott QC to take an independent look as a human rights lawyer and expert at the events of the weekend, I think it's no bad idea at all, and suggestion that Sandra White makes, and I'll raise that with Rangers when I am due to speak to them again in the very near future, about whether they would subject themselves to independent scrutiny in that regard. The final thing I would say to Sandra White is, again, she has every right to raise these questions and expect answers. What I would say is that the police are also part of our local communities. They would also have been at risk. Of course, they have been on the front line throughout this pandemic, helping to keep us safe, often going into house parties at risk to their own health, to ensure that we are kept safe. And those events that took place in George Square and Ibrox would have also, yes, put local communities at risk. I absolutely accept what Sandra White says, but also we should bear in mind the police officers themselves, because of those scenes, would have been put at risk as well. So there is an independent examination of the weekend's events by John Scott QC. I look forward to hearing what John Scott QC and his independent advisory group have to say about that. And if necessary, and if there is further action that is necessary in that respect, then I'm sure Police Scotland will take that on board.
Sandra White.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and I completely understand the Cabinet Secretary's saying in regards to police officers. They're human beings as well, they're parts of the community. But what people can't understand is the operational matter, and I hope that this independent scrutiny will come up with something and with some answers. My other question is a huge worry, which I have and others have as well. We have another huge football fixture in Glasgow coming up in 2 weeks' time. And people are obviously quite concerned about that. And I'm sure I will speak to Police Scotland to see if we have answers after Friday's meeting. But can I ask the Scottish Government, the Cabinet Secretary, will there be a liaison with Police Scotland and also with the football clubs involved to ensure that the scenes that we witnessed at the weekend do not happen again and are not replicated?
Cabinet Secretary.
Again, to answer Sandra White's question directly, yes, I've reached out, my office is reaching out to the two clubs involved in that fixture, to Police Scotland, to Glasgow City Council, and I'm hoping to have that dialogue in the coming days. Nobody wants to see those scenes repeated in 2 weeks' time. In fact, it will be completely unacceptable if those scenes are replicated. And I will be making that very, very clear to the football clubs involved. I have to say I'm already quite dismayed by some social media posts that have been brought to my attention from rival supporters groups suggesting that they will be coming out on the 21st of March during that fixture. So frankly, if football and football clubs and supporters cannot get their act together, then we will have to consider what our future options are. But yes, I will be taking that conversation forward with Police Scotland, with the two football clubs involved and with Glasgow City Council in the coming days.
Thank you. And James Dornan. Now, Mr Dornan is online, but maybe we can't get him. Mr Dornan? I'm afraid Mr Dornan has dropped off Blue Jeans, so we'll be able to put his question. So we're going to move on to the next item of business at that stage. I'll just pause for a few moments just to allow the Minister to wipe that and change seats. Slight pause.